the threat from ISIS in Iraq and Syria is growing. They're on pace to carry out twice as many attacks this year as they did last year. We're seeing ISIS-K, which is specifically the branch that is located in Afghanistan and Pakistan, start to carry out external attacks. We saw the major shooting that occurred in Moscow. We saw the bombing that occurred earlier this year in Iran. And we saw earlier this month Austrian officials thwart an ISIS attack that was planned for a Taylor Swift concert.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, there's been this controversy surrounding a visit by former President Donald Trump to Arlington National Cemetery. Give us a little bit of the background of this flap.
So former President Trump, as you mentioned, visited Arlington National Cemetery earlier this week, and he was invited by the families of the 13 Gold Star families that were killed tragically in the Abbey Gate bombing at the end of Afghanistan, the U.S. military campaign in Afghanistan back in 2021. And so former President Trump has gotten pretty close with a lot of these families, in part because the Biden administration has really sort of tried to turn a blind eye to how the military withdrew from Afghanistan. And so as a result, there was a ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery on the 3-year anniversary. The families invited the former president to join them. And while they were there was some sort of altercation between the Trump campaign and an employee with Arlington National Cemetery. And so we heard from the Army earlier today that they stand by this employee whom they say was only trying to enforce the policies of the cemetery, not any different than they would anyone else who was there. Two of the main policies being you're not allowed to take pictures at the cemetery, and you're not allowed to campaign there. And so from the Army's perspective, this staffer was trying to ensure that the Trump campaign and the people he was with were abiding by those rules, and there was some sort of dispute that occurred there. Now, we first heard this story through a leak, and then the Trump campaign disputed that version of events. They've said that they would release video to confirm what they said was their side, but they haven't done that yet. And so this is somewhat of a strange, unique story, given that the former president was there at the behest of Gold Star families, who are traditionally those who are honored at Arlington, given they're visiting their lost loved ones.
So it is the 3rd anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. A lot of family members and veterans of the Afghanistan war are not happy, to put it mildly, with how the war in Afghanistan ended, how it came to a close after 20 years. What have we heard from some of these families and some of these voices as we approach this milestone?
So a lot of people have expressed concern about sort of the counterterrorism strategy of the administration and what it means for the next administration, given we know we'll have a new president come January.
Right.
And so there are a lot of conversations that are being had about not just the way the U.S. left Afghanistan, but the U.S. military's current role in the Middle East. They have troops in Iraq and Syria that are there to fight against the resurgence of ISIS. How are they doing? According to everything we've seen and what we've heard from defense officials, the threat from ISIS in Iraq and Syria is growing. They're on pace to carry out twice as many attacks this year as they did last year. We're seeing ISIS-K, which is specifically the branch that is located in Afghanistan and Pakistan, start to carry out external attacks. We saw the major shooting that occurred in Moscow. We saw the bombing that occurred earlier this year in Iran. And we saw earlier this month Austrian officials thwart an ISIS attack that was planned for a Taylor Swift concert. And so while the U.S. doesn't have boots on the ground in Afghanistan monitoring this that closely, they still have the intelligence capabilities to have uncovered these plots before they happened and have notified the Russian, Iranian, and Austrian governments ahead of these attacks. That being said, the Austrians were the only one who were able to act quick enough to prevent it from happening.
So we've been talking for a few weeks about the tensions between Iran and Israel, and now some of that has spilled over into the West Bank. What's the latest?
Earlier this week, Israel carried out what it said was a massive counterterrorism operation in the West Bank. And so we've seen violence in the West Bank escalate specifically since the October 7th attack and the subsequent war in Gaza. That being said, the West Bank is considered, or Israel views the West Bank as a potential hotspot for future attacks to emanate from. So from Israel's perspective, they've gone into the West Bank and they conduct raids pretty frequently at this given point. However, this was a larger scale operation because they want to ensure that this doesn't become a hotspot for Hamas or become a place where Iran can export weapons to.
So the West Bank is an area where Palestinians live for the most part that is not governed currently by Hamas.
That's correct. It's governed by the Palestinian Authority as well as by the Israeli government in certain parts. Hamas has for several years tried to get a foothold in the West Bank so that they could, in theory, try and attack Israel from both sides, from the east and from the west. And we saw Hamas militants killed in this West Bank raid earlier this week.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.